The room was filled with diplomats, charity leaders, and senior members of Britain's royal establishment, when one sentence shattered the evening. Princess Anne had barely reached the podium when Queen Camilla's daughter, Laura Lopes, stepped forward, seized control of the moment, and delivered a public rebuke so personal that conversations stopped mid-sentence. But the real shock came moments later, when Prince William learned exactly what had been said. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne felt the room tighten, yet she refused to let the silence control her. The Royal Women in Service reception at St. James's Palace was meant to honor decades of public duty, and the closing address belonged to the Princess Royal. The title Princess Royal is traditionally granted by the sovereign to his eldest daughter, giving her position historic weight. Charles sat beside Camilla in the front row, while Laura watched nearby. William was absent at a royal foundation meeting. Laura moved before Anne could begin. She declared that the Princess Royal represented an outdated form of service that no longer speaks for the Queen's household. Then she ordered an aide to remove Anne's name card from the principal table and announced that Camilla's family would take a more visible role. The principal table was the honored seating area for senior guests, so removing the card carried weight. It was a public stripping of status. Anne gripped the lectern. She looked directly at Laura, steadied her voice, and delivered her speech. She did not shout. She did not retreat. Camilla remained seated, neither supporting her daughter nor stopping her. And that silence cut deeper than the insult. Charles stayed still, trapped between his wife, his sister, and the room waiting for him to choose. William received the recording minutes later. His private secretary placed the phone beside his folder, and the prince watched Laura remove Anne's card. He replayed it once, then asked whether his father had intervened. When the answer was no, his face hardened. He slammed the folder shut, rose, and said, "No one humiliates her in the name of this family." William left immediately. His anger was not only for Anne, it was for the belief that service could be displaced by private influence. As his car turned toward St. James's Palace, Anne slipped through a side corridor, while Laura was warned that the Prince of Wales was coming directly for her. William was no longer traveling to a reception. He was traveling toward a reckoning, and everyone inside the palace knew the next conversation could divide the family beyond repair. To the public, the confrontation appeared to be a reckless insult, delivered during a ceremonial evening. Inside the royal family, it struck much deeper. Anne saw an attack on a lifetime of duty. William saw a threat to the values he expected to inherit. Camilla saw her daughter standing dangerously close to a line she could not uncross. And Laura believed she was finally saying what the palace had been too afraid to admit. Anne had never built her authority through charm, applause, or family closeness. She had earned it through decades of relentless work and duties others avoided. The Princess Royal, a title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, carried historic weight, but she treated it as responsibility rather than reward. She expected no praise. She did expect the institution to defend one principle: service must be earned. Laura Lopes lived under different pressure. She held no royal role, meaning she had no official duty or constitutional authority, yet her connection to Camilla opened private doors. She attended family gatherings, entered planning rooms, and watched ceremonies take shape. Still, whenever the monarchy faced the public, she felt pushed aside. That resentment had hardened into anger. William understood Anne's value because she had never used grief for influence. She supported him during family crises, warned that popularity without discipline could weaken the crown, and treated him as an heir who still had much to learn. Watching her humiliated awakened gratitude, guilt, and fury. He was defending the person who had taught him what duty cost. Camilla confronted Laura inside a private retiring room, a chamber used by royals to withdraw from public events. She demanded to know why her daughter had hijacked Anne's speech. Laura answered that years of being treated like an embarrassment had become unbearable. The Queen felt anger rise, but maternal instinct stopped her from condemning the woman before her. Charles faced the fracture from another direction. He removed his glasses, placed them beside an untouched glass of water, and admitted to an advisor that punishing Laura would wound his wife. while protecting her would alienate William and Anne. This was no longer a family quarrel. It had become a test of royal authority. Laura then made the claim that changed everything. She said Camilla had spoken privately about modernizing representation and complained that Anne's influence blocked other family voices. When the monarch denied authorizing any public attack, her daughter opened a notebook and pointed to one recorded sentence. The insult had wounded Anne, but the notes threatened something larger. They could transform Laura's outburst from an impulsive attack into evidence of a campaign that began long before the reception. The confrontation at St. James's Palace did not begin beneath the chandeliers that evening. Its true beginning came 3 weeks earlier, during a closed rehearsal attended by fewer than a dozen people. A chair was moved, a name was crossed from a program, and one quiet sentence turned a disagreement over protocol into a personal declaration of war. Everyone who witnessed it later understood. That was the moment the explosion became inevitable. Camilla had spent months pressing for a place for members of her private family at charitable events. She believed inclusion would honor the life she had built before becoming queen. Anne saw danger instead. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, argued that private relatives could not appear to represent the crown without defined duties, responsibility, and accountability. The divide sharpened inside Clarence House, the King and Queen's London residence, during the planning rehearsal. Laura entered, saw Anne's chair beside Charles at the principal table, and ordered staff to move it into the second row. She told an aide to place her own name there instead. "My mother is queen now," she said. "The room must reflect that." Anne arrived moments later. She studied the altered arrangement, lifted the chair herself, and returned it beside the king. Then she faced Laura and spoke with a calmness that cut deeper than anger. "Your mother's marriage does not give you command of royal duty." Several aides lowered their eyes, but Laura noticed every movement. She felt corrected, exposed, and dismissed before people who already treated her as an outsider. Laura confronted Camilla that evening in a private conversation later recorded in her handwritten notes. The Queen admitted she was tired of seeing Anne treated as the automatic voice of authority. Yet she also warned her daughter never to challenge the Princess Royal publicly. Laura remembered the frustration and ignored the warning. 2 days before the reception, Laura approved a revised program that reduced Anne's speech and inserted a family reflection under her own name. The program was the official running order for the ceremony, so changing it altered who spoke and when. A junior courtier restored Anne's original time slot. Laura discovered the correction and decided she would intervene herself. William received the rehearsal report while traveling toward St. James's Palace. He read the seating change, the altered program, and the recorded exchange twice. The insult was no longer spontaneous. It was the final move in a planned struggle over status. By the time William reached the palace doors, he was not preparing to question Laura's judgment. He was preparing to accuse her of engineering Anne's humiliation from the beginning. Laura was still defending her speech when the doors opened behind her. Prince William entered without ceremony, without an aide announcing him, and without the controlled expression expected of a future king. He placed the rehearsal report on the table, looked first at Camilla, then at Charles, and finally at Laura. What followed was not a polite royal disagreement. It was the fury of an heir who believed his family's deepest code had been violated. Charles ordered everyone into a closed drawing room after the guests left. The room was meant for private family discussions, beyond cameras and staff. Anne refused at first, but William stopped her at the door. He told her no decision about her reputation would be made without her present, and she returned. The king tried to contain the damage. He called the evening an unfortunate misunderstanding, but William rejected the phrase. Moving Anne's chair, altering her speech, and humiliating her before guests was not confusion. The Royal Foundation, the charitable organization led by the Prince and Princess of Wales, depended on trust, service, and discipline. Laura had challenged all three. William pushed the rehearsal report across the table and demanded to know why she believed she held authority over a working royal. Laura refused to apologize. She said Anne treated Camilla's children as though they should remain invisible, welcomed privately, but erased whenever the monarchy faced the country. The prince stepped closer. Visibility is earned by service. You do not take it by humiliating the woman who has carried this family for 50 years. Laura held his stare and answered that Anne had controlled the family for decades through fear, tradition, and the certainty that no one would challenge her. Anne moved her chair back. She told William she required no protection, yet her voice broke when she admitted that Camilla's silence had hurt more than Laura's insult. The Queen looked down. William then asked whether she had ever said Anne's influence should be weakened. Camilla hesitated. The pause became an answer before she spoke. She admitted complaining privately that Anne dominated internal decisions, but insisted she had never authorized a public attack. Laura felt abandoned and accused her mother of retreating only because William was angry. William ended the argument with a decision. Until a review was completed, Laura would attend no event linked to his foundation or household. Then he turned to Charles and demanded that the king decide whether his household would impose the same restriction. William had delivered his punishment, but the greater battle now belonged to Charles, whose next decision would reveal whether blood, marriage, or duty held the strongest claim over the crown. The confrontation exposed a truth the palace had avoided for years. Charles wore the crown, but William controlled the future around it. His foundations, advisors, public credibility, and influence over the next generation gave him a form of power no ceremonial title could disguise. As the king sat alone with the decision, he understood that protecting Laura might preserve peace with Camilla for one night, but it could cost him the loyalty of his heir. Charles understood the division. The sovereign's household, meaning the staff and events controlled in the monarch's name, remained under his authority. William, however, controlled his office, charities, and the royal foundation. He could not remove Laura from private family life, but he could shut every door leading into the monarchy he would inherit. Anne carried a different power. She held no constitutional rank above Camilla, yet decades of work, experience, and trust made her impossible to dismiss. Senior courtiers feared that abandoning her would send a dangerous message. Private relatives could interfere with official duty, while working royals were expected to endure the humiliation silently. Charles sat alone in his study and read the reception transcript line by line. The document was a written record of every public remark made that evening. When he reached Laura's description of Anne as outdated, he stopped. He set the pages down and stared at a framed photograph of himself beside his sister when they were young. Camilla entered quietly and asked him not to punish Laura in a way that would brand her forever. She admitted her daughter had behaved badly, but warned that William's anger was turning a family wound into institutional exile. Charles answered that Laura had invoked the Queen's household while attacking Anne. If he remained silent, the insult would appear to carry royal approval. The king's advisors offered no softer escape. The Lord Chamberlain, the senior official responsible for major ceremonial arrangements, presented a written recommendation barring Laura from planning meetings, principal seating, and events where she might be mistaken for a royal representative. Camilla understood that her daughter had used her position as both shield and weapon. William then delivered his condition through a recorded telephone call. He would not attend the next joint family reception unless Anne's role was restored, and Laura apologized directly. For the first time, the heir used his presence as leverage against his father's household. Charles signed the restriction order. Camilla removed her ring, placed it on the table, and said he had chosen Anne and William over her family. The signature protected royal discipline, but inside the marriage, it landed like a betrayal, and the first consequences spread through the palace before morning. By sunrise, the punishment was no longer an argument behind closed doors. Laura's name disappeared from 2 guest lists. Her clearance for a palace planning meeting was cancelled. Staff who had once greeted her without question were instructed to request formal authorization. But the most painful consequence unfolded away from the offices, where Camilla sat alone and realized that her daughter's rebellion had placed her marriage, her public role, and her private family on opposing sides. Laura learned the new rules immediately. She was removed from upcoming Royal Foundation receptions, barred from ceremonial planning sessions, and forbidden to speak for the Queen's household. The Royal Foundation was William and Catherine's main charitable organization, while ceremonial planning sessions decided who attended, spoke, and sat in official positions. The order made one fact brutally clear: she held no representative authority. Anne's position moved in the opposite direction. The palace released her full closing speech, restored her name to the central seat, and confirmed her as principal royal guest at the next Women in Service engagement. That recognition mattered because withdrawing her would have suggested that public pressure could erase decades of duty. Yet the victory brought her no comfort. Laura arrived at Clarence House expecting to see her mother. A security officer stopped her politely and asked her to wait while authorization was obtained. She had crossed that entrance for years without question. Now every passing second told her that one public outburst had turned familiarity into suspicion. Camilla met her privately and said the restrictions would remain until she apologized. Laura accused the Queen of sacrificing her to protect a monarchy that had never fully accepted either of them. Her mother reached across the table, but she pulled her hand away. When Laura left, Camilla remained seated, grieving both the damage and her own role in creating it. Anne considered ending the conflict herself. She told Edward she might withdraw from the next engagement before more relationships were broken. He warned that retreat would reward the humiliation and teach others to mistake restraint for weakness. She listened, but still doubted whether another ceremony was worth another wound. William called before she decided. He told Anne this was no longer about pride. If she stepped aside, the palace would prove that service could be displaced by private access. She agreed to attend, but demanded one condition: a meeting with him alone, without Charles, Camilla, advisors, or staff. She needed to know whether loyalty had become control in a dangerous disguise. The official fallout had restored Anne's position, yet her private meeting with William would determine whether his anger had defended her or merely created another weapon inside the family. There were no advisors in the room, no written statements, and no palace officials waiting outside with prepared language. Anne and William sat opposite one another as aunt and nephew rather than senior royals. For the first time since the confrontation, William's anger had nowhere to perform. Anne thanked him for defending her, then told him plainly that fury, even righteous fury, could become dangerous in the hands of a future king. Anne had chosen a small sitting room at Windsor and dismissed the attendant herself. She closed the door, making clear that nothing said between them would appear in official minutes, the written record normally kept after formal royal meetings. No aides would soften the truth. No prepared statement would protect either of them. William admitted why the insult had struck him so deeply. Watching Anne stand alone had reminded him of earlier family wounds, moments when silence allowed public cruelty to harden into accepted truth. He refused to inherit a monarchy that demanded loyalty from everyone, yet defended no one when that loyalty became costly. Anne listened, then challenged him. His instinct had been honorable, she said, but threatening to withdraw from a joint reception had cornered Charles. A future king who used affection as leverage might win one argument and still lose the family he expected to lead. William looked down, and for the first time his anger sounded like fear. William confessed that Anne's silence had frightened him. He thought Laura's attack had finally broken her. Anne answered that silence was not surrender. She had finished the speech because no private relative would decide how decades of service ended. That distinction mattered. Endurance could appear quiet without becoming weak. Anne then named her condition. She would accept Laura's apology only in private, never through a staged statement written for the press. Laura had to understand that closeness to royalty was not the same as serving the crown, the public institution represented by the monarch and working family. William changed course. He called Charles from the room and withdrew his attendance ultimatum once Anne's role was formally protected. He would attend the next reception because she had asked him to stop escalating the conflict. Anne placed her hand over the closed sanctions folder. Protection is not the same as revenge. William nodded and left it behind. The request arrived through a brief, recorded telephone message. That evening, Laura contacted Anne directly and requested a meeting without mothers, kings, heirs, advisors, or cameras. William's fury had forced the palace to act, but Anne's restraint created the first path toward peace. And now Laura had to decide whether she possessed the courage to walk through it. By the next morning, the private family war belonged to the country. Television panels debated status. Newspapers questioned Camilla's influence, and crowds gathered beneath palace gates, expecting another royal fracture. Yet one photograph changed the emotional direction of the story. It did not show William shouting or Laura defending herself. It showed Princess Anne returning to duty, standing alone beneath the palace crest, refusing to appear either defeated or triumphant. Broadcasters framed the clash as a battle between earned service and inherited access. Commentators asked whether Camilla's private family had moved too close to the machinery of monarchy, the network of offices, staff, ceremonies, and authority that turns royal identity into public power. The question mattered because private affection could no longer be allowed to look like official command. Buckingham Palace answered with a restrained statement. The announcement confirmed that only designated working royals and authorized officials could speak for royal households, meaning the formal offices that act in the name of senior family members. It also confirmed Anne's unchanged role at future service engagements. The wording was calm, but the message was unmistakable. The Daily Chronicle then published the image that defined the crisis. Its front page showed Anne's removed placecard beneath the headline, "The Line She Crossed." Beside it appeared the princess completing her speech while the room watched in silence. During the evening broadcast, a veteran royal correspondent raised both images and said, "One woman attempted to claim the room, the other proved she never needed to." Crowds gathered near Buckingham Palace, carrying handwritten signs reading, "Service before status." When Anne's car passed on the way to her next engagement, applause followed it along the gates. She gave one brief nod, but did not lower the window. The response honored her, yet it also deepened Camilla's isolation. Camilla watched the broadcast alone. She turned off the television when commentators described her silence as approval. The Queen finally understood that doing nothing had created its own public verdict, one she had never intended, but could no longer escape. Laura met Anne at Windsor that afternoon. In the private conversation, she admitted that she had used the reception to punish years of feeling excluded. Anne told her that exclusion did not justify impersonating authority. Laura then apologized without conditions. The princess accepted it, but warned that forgiveness would not erase consequences. Charles, William, and Camilla now had to define Laura's place inside the sovereign's own household before resentment borrowed royal power again. The country had chosen its symbol in Anne, but the final verdict would be written inside the family, where forgiveness had to coexist with boundaries that could never again be ignored. The crisis ended not with a dramatic expulsion, but with a boundary the royal family could no longer avoid. Laura remained Camilla's daughter, welcomed within private family life, yet permanently separated from official authority. Anne returned to duty without demanding revenge. William learned that strength required restraint. Camilla faced the cost of silence. And Charles finally declared that affection might shape a family, but only service could shape the monarchy. Charles confirmed the final decision in a documented household order. Laura could attend birthdays, private dinners, and family gatherings, but she would no longer join official planning meetings, occupy principal ceremonial seating, or speak at royal events unless invited in a clearly private role. The order mattered because affection could remain without being mistaken for authority. The king also approved a new household protocol, a formal rule explaining who may represent the crown and who may not. It applied to every relative of a married and royal, not only Camilla's family, turning the punishment into a permanent safeguard rather than personal revenge. Laura met Anne privately one final time. She apologized for calling her outdated and for removing her name card. Anne accepted the words, but offered no easy comfort. Respect, she said, could not be demanded through closeness to power. Laura left saddened, yet the anger that had driven her was gone. William arrived early at the next Women in Service engagement and sat among the audience. He did not stand beside the lectern or claim the moment. The prince understood that supporting Anne now meant allowing her to speak without being overshadowed by his protection. Camilla later acknowledged in a private recorded conversation that her silence had caused harm. Anne answered that the queen must never again allow family frustration to borrow the voice of the crown. She forgave her, but she did not erase the warning. Charles delivered the final public correction at the next service dinner. He restored Anne's seat beside him, rose when she entered, and waited for his sister to sit first. The gesture said what no palace statement could. Laura's attack had failed because she confused visibility with authority. William had succeeded because he forced the institution to defend service. Yet Anne prevented that defense from becoming revenge. And when Anne finally rose to speak, no chair was moved, no name was removed, and no one in the room misunderstood why she stood there. Not because of marriage, privilege, or personal favor, but because a lifetime of service had earned a place no insult could take away. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.